Hello, my name is Norman Rose, and this is a presentation on classroom management. Now, this presentation isn't meant to give you all the answers. It's just meant to point out to you some topics that you may want to explore further. In fact, entire books have been written on every topic in this presentation. I can tell you right now, this presentation has a lot of ideas, and they're presented with a lot of words on the screen. So feel free to pause any time to stop and read either before or after you listen to my comments. To begin with, here's the philosophy or the psychology of this presentation. It takes a holistic or ecological view of classroom management. And the idea is that your management should be congruent with who you are and what you believe, as well as having your management based on good research and practice. With that in mind, let's look at this overview of what we'll be covering. We'll start with pinpointing your attitudes and beliefs, and then from there we'll look at how that should help you construct a management system that's right for you. And then finally we'll look at all the factors that you have to include in your management system. So take a look at this chart. Which items from this chart describe your attitude best on an everyday basis? And can you see how different life attitudes can lead to different management goals? Once you pinpoint your goals for students, you can ask yourself what you think it takes to get them to reach those goals. That's the beginning of your management system, knowing what you want and what you think it takes to get them to do what you want. To help you think a little more clearly about what you want and what you expect from students, study this chart. Which one or ones which matches your attitude and beliefs about human beings? It's also important to think about how you're going to set and enforce your expectations. That's a matter of leadership style. To help you think about your leadership style, look at these categories. Which one or ones is going to feel right for you? What you could do consistently, day after day. So now we're ready for section 2. We'll start by looking at how you set up the physical environment in a way that suits your personality, your leadership style, as well as to suit your students' needs. As you look over these questions, think about how much interaction do you want your students to engage in? How much socializing? What kind of things do you want on the walls? Do you want it to be professional looking? Do you want it to be student work? What kind of environmental factors make you comfortable? And then how will your preferences affect your students? Now moving on to section 3. You're going to be planning curriculum units, and you're going to be leading activities within those units. So here in section 3, we'll look at the kinds of management you have to consider when you plan and execute curriculum. What curriculum will you use? Well, you'll probably say that a lot or most of your curriculum is set for you by state and local guidelines. But you still have curriculum decisions to make. Look at these questions. Think about how they relate to classroom management. Now let's take a look at instruction. There are a lot of management decisions and actions that take place during instruction and classroom activities. Look at these questions and think about the management implications of each one. Instruction takes two general forms, either direct or indirect instruction. Each type has management implications. For instance, when you use direct instruction, you have to think about how you keep everyone's attention and keep everyone accountable and focused. In indirect instruction, you have to think about how to keep everyone on task and cooperating. Moving on to section 4, we're going to look at how management involves more than just what goes on during lessons. It includes the entire school day with all the feelings that everyone projects. Like it or not, you have to find ways to manage all that emotion that is constantly stirring around you. You'll notice that some teachers try to keep a very professional tone and manner, and you especially see that in the upper grades. Some teachers project a more personal tone. As with everything else here, you need to find the balance that's right for you. Just realize that however you project yourself, it will affect the emotional climate of your classroom, and you have to deal with that climate all the time. Part of the emotional climate is having to monitor and manage the behavior of individuals and groups. When you know what your goals are for young people and what you expect of them, and you're aware of your own leadership qualities, you can begin to create a congruent system of behavior management. To start this consideration, consider 3 levels of behavior management you need to incorporate and prepare for: preventive, supportive, and corrective. You don't really need to reinvent the wheel. There are already several behavior management theories and systems you can choose from. Some emphasize preventive and supportive techniques, while others emphasize corrective measures. So we need to look at these theories and systems more closely so you can find the best fit for the way you lead and teach and manage. As we look at each of the different models, we'll consider its overall emphasis as seen by the teacher and as seen by the student. And we'll look at the way the model is applied and under what conditions. Then we'll look at the payoffs and the trade-offs of using each model, the pros and cons you might expect. Finally, I'll reach my conclusion, which you may or may not take with you. You can reach your own. We'll start with a management style that really isn't a system. It's managing by personal charisma. That means managing by personal charm or force. It's what inspires Hollywood school movies. You know the scenario where a teacher or principal comes into a school full of angry, bored, disenfranchised students, and this super individual passionately goads the students into having more self-respect, more motivation, more pride, and by the end the kids are marching across the graduation stage, most of them preparing for college and careers, fade to credits. Now, if you think you can be this kind of a driving force, charming or pushing your students to greatness, go right ahead. But be prepared to have to keep up the charm and the pressure for days, weeks, months at a time. Can you do it? Now we'll look at something that is a lot more systematic: management by efficiency. This means managing for maximum learning time, keeping the flow of teaching and learning so smooth, so constant, that there's little room for even thinking about misbehavior. It involves many well-documented techniques, as you can see here, such as the ripple effect, with-itness, keeping everyone accountable, keeping the pacing and the transition smooth and even, giving students efficient help, which means not spending too long with any one student or grouping them real quickly and then dispersing them once you're done, giving body language instead of going into lectures and things like that. The idea is to keep learning moving all the time. Management by efficiency does require a lot of organization and preparation and consistency on your part. And you have to stay calm and rather matter-of-fact about routines and procedures. Of course, it comes with no guarantees. A student can still throw a monkey wrench into your smooth working machine and cause disruptions, so other techniques will have to be in your management tool belt for those sorts of things. Management by imposition is a broad term to include any techniques that put the teacher firmly in charge. That means usually a system of rewards and/or punishments. For instance, in behavior modification, teachers can set up systems of points or gold stars or tokens to keep track of individual or group behavior, and those things can be traded in or redeemed for rewards, prizes, food, whatever. The method is supposed to be scientific, so behaviors are molded systematically. But many teachers get rather casual about doling out the goodies. In any case, catch them being good is the motto you would normally go by. Assertive discipline was popular some years ago, and it's still in use. It's more punishment-oriented since it expects correct behavior, so it doesn't reward it. It's more like the 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing, where students get warnings until they cross a certain line, then major consequences take place. However you do it, and whatever face you put on it, imposition puts you in charge, and that has its good and bad sides. And to stay scientific and objective, it puts you in a position of not being able to consider motives or excuses of any kind. Do you like considering motives and excuses? Do you think it would help when you're dealing with a student who behaves inappropriately? If so, consider management by analysis. Here you get to play counselor, but only for brief moments, not for long sessions. You'll need to read and research about techniques for analyzing group dynamics and how individuals play roles within groups, often unconsciously. And you'll also need to learn techniques for analyzing motives and how to confront a student once you've done your analysis. I'm going to spend a little time here giving you some of the specific techniques you might want to learn more about and try. Consider the grouping of students in a class as a dynamic force, with each individual filling roles to make the force feel and act. Or even think of the group as a living organism, and each individual fills a role like a vital organ. So if an individual plays his or her part well and appropriately, it helps the group feel and act appropriately. But if an individual plays the part clumsily, selfishly, or antisocially, the whole group is thrown off kilter. So your job is to analyze who needs help getting his or her role changed or modified. Another analytical tool will have you analyzing a student's unconscious motive for misbehaving, and you can choose from 4 typical motives. Once you have observed and guessed a motive, you confront the student briefly to let him or her know that you're on to the game, and then you proceed to find a way to change the behavior. A third model has you reduce it all down to a formula of 4 steps, not analyzing motives or group dynamics, but just quickly helping the student analyze where he or she went wrong in relation to classroom rules. But watch out. Step number 1 might take some time and repetition. A 4th model has you set up consequences for misbehavior. This is analytical because the consequences should be thought out and appropriate to the inappropriate behavior. For instance, let's say the student never closes the door after walking in or out. So, you tell that student he or she is going to be assigned to be the door monitor for the whole class for a day or 2. Management by analysis is a great model when you get good at it and you're good at quickly assessing and analyzing a situation, and you can get fairly quick results. But it can backfire, and it can get very bogged down with some students. Managing by democracy emphasizes respect for each other's opinions, feelings, and preferences. This might require a lot of dialogue at times, group decisions by vote or even consensus. As an example, everybody helps make the rules, and then you would be the one in charge of making sure that they're phrased in positive terms, such as, we respect each other's feelings and property, rather than keep your hands off such and such, or don't do such and such. All this dialogue and respect might force you to try some new ways of talking to your students, such as saying, "I feel upset by the way you treated her," rather than talking down or criticizing the person. There are whole books and workshops on these kinds of communication techniques. Democracy in the classroom, as in society, can be messy and time-consuming when it comes to making decisions, but it can be rewarding to see students respond to higher values than what you get when you use rewards and punishments. Ultimately, you have to put together a set of techniques for yourself that match your attitude, your personality, and your expectations. Just make sure you cover those 3 areas of preventive, supportive, and corrective. As a final note on this topic of behavior management, consider your views and your expectations regarding the moral or ethical development of young people. Is it important to you? Do you feel that it's part of your unwritten job description? How does your set of management techniques that you've put together contribute to your students' growth as ethical and responsible citizens? We're going to move now to Section 5, and here you're asked to consider all sorts of factors that impact your classroom, and therefore you'll have to include in your management planning and decisions. We'll start with your students' physical and emotional well-being. Take a look at this list. How much do you think each one of these issues might affect your classroom? And how could you prepare for each one of them? Now here's a topic that could be fun or quite maddening. There are these trends that run through society, fads and scenarios that might be short or long-lasting. Look over this list and consider how you're going to deal with the way they impinge on your classroom. Think of other trends that might be more recent or more local. Think about how you're going to deal with them. Now here's a topic that we really do have to think about. The world is an uncertain place, and tragedy comes even into our classroom. What will you do in the aftermath of sad events? What would be congruent with your beliefs and your management style? It's said that fish are not aware of water, and in the same sense, you may not be aware of the environmental factors all around you all the time because they're so familiar. In other words, the other adults in the school where you are, the principal, the vice principal, the secretaries and volunteers and custodians and gym teachers and whoever, they all are a part of, really, your environment and therefore a part of your management system. The questions here ask how you're going to deal with certain people in your environment. Of course, deal can mean looking at them as resources, as adversaries, as people just getting in the way, as people who are very helpful. So think about what they mean in terms of how you manage your classroom. And then there are the families and parents of your students. Your students live somewhere when they aren't at school. Where is that? What kind of neighborhood is it? Is it urban, suburban, rural? What's the socioeconomic situation? What's the ethnic makeup? What are the local sentiments, the local prejudices? And how will you incorporate all those facts into your management of the young people coming from that environment into your classroom? So now we've looked at all these different issues that you have to consider in your management, but there is one other area of management that can't go unmentioned: the management of your own growth as a person and as a professional. Just as you're the final arbiter of your students' cognitive and emotional well-being during school hours, you're also the ultimate judge of how your own life is or should be unfolding. Do you need to work on your health or on your attitude? Do you need to work on your social relations? Do you need to work to increase career satisfaction? or change the course of your career completely? Do you know how to find the resources to make changes? Do you know who to talk to? Are you willing to make big decisions or little sacrifices? It's up to you. And when you make changes for the better, won't your students feel the difference?